watching this recording after the fact, we apologize. The board had some technical issues this morning, and we had to delay start, and the public and or media are unable to join in our open meeting, but this will be available for review. So on behalf of the board, we apologize for that. We've got some good news to start our meeting with, and that is the board is excited and pleased to introduce Lynn Strawn to the board. She is the new provincial appointment. To many of those who may watch, Lynn is no newcomer to the Barrie scene. She's had several volunteer and community positions, including 3 terms on council. So we welcome Lynn, and perhaps, Lynn, I'll just throw it over to you to give us a bit of an update as to what's going on in your life right now.
Thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure to be part of the Barrie Police Services Board. I was honored to be appointed by the provincial government. As you mentioned, I was on Barrie City Council for 3 terms from 2003 to 2014 and had a lot of interaction with the community and the Barrie Police. Since that time, I've continued to work with the Barrie Police on several projects, most namely projects that involve the social service agencies, and trying to work with the Barrie Police to come together to assist in forming a hub for social service agencies, which dates back to Barrie Pathways to End Homelessness. And I've always enjoyed working with Barrie Police Service, and so as I said, I'm very happy to be on the board. I am currently a partner in a consulting firm called Solutions Inc., and we are strategy, tactical communication consultants. We also work in urban planning, community consultation, and land development. So we interact with the community in a broad variety of ways. Further to that, as a volunteer, I am the vice chairperson of the YMCA of Simcoe Muskoka, the treasurer of the Barrie Film Festival, and an advisory member of the Salvation Army Bayside Mission. So still very much involved in the community and really enjoy doing that. I live in Barrie with my family, and we are, just like everybody else, undergoing these COVID restrictions, trying to make the best of things. So you can often find us skating our backyard rink or hanging out at a toboggan hill.
Awesome. I know I speak for the board that your experience and leadership will be extremely valuable to us, Lynn. So welcome to the board.
Thank you.
The agenda has been distributed in advance. A motion to approve the agenda. Mayor Lehman, are there any conflicts of interest to declare relating to the items in the agenda? Seeing none, move on to the minutes of January 21, 2021 were distributed. A motion to approve those minutes. RF, Mayor Lehman. And moving on then, presentation, which is always exciting to hear, our 2020 year in review. Chief, I know you have a number of members from the leadership team. I'll throw it over to you to walk us through a review of 2020, please.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience as we rectified the technical problems. We do have members of our leadership team that has put together an overview of what we experienced, what our community experienced in 2020. It was a very interesting year from many perspectives. I'm going to pass it on to Deputy Chief Allen, who will commence or kick off our presentation, which will include many members of our service, and would like to thank Jenna Mays from our corporate communications, who will share the screen for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. All right, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present the 2020 year in review. Given all the obstacles that 2020 has brought, we are proud of what we have collectively been able to accomplish. During this 30-minute presentation, 5 members of the leadership team will join me, including Acting Deputy Rich Johnson, Acting Records Manager Danielle Martin, Human Resources Manager Steve Bound, Inspector Rob Burke, and Inspector Peter Dusnap. A special thank you to Jeanette, Victoria, and Sergeant Talarico for their immense contribution. Thank you as well to all our members for their exceptional efforts and achievements throughout the challenging year and for sharing their many accomplishments for this presentation. 2020 was a unique year. We started the year planning for the move to our new headquarters, and we were able to successfully move all units into the new building. Then, almost immediately, COVID hit and restrictions came into effect. The Barrie Police Service acted swiftly, adapted, and maintained the highest of standards throughout the first wave, the summer, fall months, and now continue well into wave 2. Proudly, I would state that although COVID had many impacts across our community, it did not prevent our service from making significant progress in several areas, as you will hear shortly. While most of these pictures were taken in 2020, the recommendations around physical distancing and wearing of PPE changed throughout the year. What is pictured may not reflect the current guidelines on social distancing and wearing of PPE. For many months, we prepared for the move. Much planning, communication, and internal collaboration was part of everyday routine for many of our members. Our move began Saturday, March 7 and concluded on March 15. The Barrie Police Service strategically staged the move to maintain full operational capacity and full business continuity. There was minimal, if any, disruption to the community. Once settled, the new facility was key to our pandemic planning and response. Our organizational chart saw a few changes in 2020, the most notable being the creation of a second deputy chief. With 2 deputy chiefs, one now takes responsible for operations, which encompasses operations and investigative services. My role, identified as support, is inclusive of finance, records and information management services, information technology, and operational support. Further enhancements include the merger of risk management with professional standards, inclusive of an additional sergeant in professional standards. It also includes the launch of the case management unit.
Deputy, so from the COVID-19 pandemic response on behalf of the service, we were quick out of the gate with new processes and practices. Right from the outset, we were at the forefront of leveraging technology to enhance our capabilities. And platforms generally like Teams, Microsoft Teams, and Smartsheets were used with great success. In addition, we had looked at new equipment, the Sandy Sport machine in terms of decontaminating areas, and we based our new processes on current information provided to us by the Ministry of Health and the local health unit. Early adoption, we're also incredibly agile in leaders requiring mandatory PPE throughout the organization. This was evidenced by the number of other outside police agencies that contacted us looking for our processes and practices, from PPE deployment to stores of them to the screening and the mandatory active screening before entering the building. We led the way. Additionally, constant communication. The Police Operations Center stood up as a result of the emergency operations stood up from the city, was in constant contact with our members, and that included daily updates and platoon parade visits as a way of messaging to our members. As you can appreciate with an organization our size, when you explain why you're doing what you're doing, you increase buy-in and you get that compliance. In addition, it speaks to the wellness of our members. On that note, organizationally, in the first wave, our deployment model was adjusted to balance the health and wellness of our members, while at the same time being able to provide to our community the same level of response, emergency response, that they should expect from a police service. outside of luck, and I'm not suggesting outside of that's completely off the board, but we think we've had no cases of COVID positive in our organization, and that is in no small part due to our aggressive response from the outset. Operational services. So our alternate response unit. Our alternate response unit was utilized more effectively to divert calls from the front line to the online reporting. Personnel was set up to work from home. We're looking at this moving into the future too, with the potentials there. With respect to community concerns, we worked with the local Black Lives Matter demonstration organizers to ensure a peaceful demonstration and maintain safety within the community. Milligan's Pond was another major incident taking place within the city. We coordinated with the Busby Center, City Bylaw, and other social agencies, ensuring a peaceful and uneventful removal of persons from the areas of Milligan's Pond. But more importantly, our members maintained a positive relationship with individuals by visiting repeatedly and explaining why we were doing what we were doing to those citizens there. With respect to operational services, I show you these numbers. These are our in custody and arrests. As you can appreciate, what I would call the COVID effect on decreased persons in custody. Focused efforts were made by our operational members to find alternative means to reducing people being brought back to the station. This lends itself, of course, to those who would have been kept in custody being rearrested on breach of conditions, as well as fail to appear courts and fingerprints. Near and dear to my own heart, evidence-based policing. So as you can appreciate, in 2020, we began our Intimate Partner Violence Enhanced Monitoring pilot study, and that examined the frontline strategies to reduce domestic violence recidivism. Additionally, we developed an evidence-based youth program to replace Value, Influence, and Peers, a historic program that was based on good intent, but no actual research. And the evidence-based youth program, Inside Out is what it's called, is based on current research regarding adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. Our attempt here is to have an upstream impact on youths disproportionately exposed to those adverse experiences in childhood. Additionally, as a result of some of the research we had done in-house, we participated in the Criminology Consortium Conference. It's an international conference, mostly attended by academics, but some police officers. And we spoke and presented on the Intimate Partner Violence pilot study, in addition to the effectiveness of Collaborate Barrie, which was a randomized controlled trial, and a third presentation on the effect of COVID-19, the effect of COVID-19 pandemic on intimate partner violence reporting. Lastly, we also completed a pre-post study with the University of Western Ontario, looking at evidence-based policing uptake in a policing organization. We're currently waiting analysis from our academic partners. Before I go on, I would like to note that board member Strawn, you had asked about grant writing. The school-based program, we have applied to the civil remedies grant as a revenue stream, and our student at the time heading up the evidence-based youth program was the primary author on that with one of our members. So I'll now pass it on to Inspector Dusnap to highlight some of our communication.
Good morning. In 2020, our communications unit processed over 130,000 calls for service. More than 30,000 of these calls were 911 emergency related calls, but this does not include, but this does include accidental dials as well as legitimate emergencies. Calls to our non-emergency phone lines make up more than 77,000 calls received, and more than 28,000 of the calls were from internal extensions. This can include other members of the service calling for an update on an ongoing call, the front desk or alternate response unit calling to ask for an officer to be dispatched, or command staff calling to check up on the progress of a call. In 2020, the communications unit had two significant initiatives or events that affected the unit. The first was the change in the relief shift work schedule from a 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift to an 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. shift. This was to improve quality of service, supervisor oversight, and member well-being by utilizing existing resources to address increased call volumes during peak periods. As well, with the move to the new building, we were no longer leasing the facility at 60 Bell Farm, and we're required to move our backup communications site. With the collaboration of our IT unit, we were able to successfully move the backup communications center to our training facility at 79 Bell Farm. In regards to the tactical support unit, in 2020, during the fall, the tactical support unit ran a 2-day selection process, which resulted in 6 Barrie Police Service members attending a 5-week basic tactical officers course. 5 individuals were selected to join the tactical development program and can be deployed to our tactical support unit at future dates. As well, you can see from the slide that our tactical support unit responded to 85 calls and executed 20 high-risk search warrants for the Barrie Police Service as well as other police services in Ontario. Further, our 2 canine handlers and canines responded to 168 occurrences, which included tracking of suspects as well as drug and weapon detection. 2 examples of our tactical support unit calls were Project Glaze and Project Moon, which you will hear about later from Deputy Johnson. Traffic services. In 2020, we hosted our first Barrie Police Ground School to train additional remote piloted aircraft system pilots. Due to this, we currently have 5 trained pilots. Our traffic unit instituted or initiated a schedule change pilot project, which provides more opportunities to focus on community traffic complaints and ensure further road safety within our community. As well, our traffic services hosted a standard field sobriety course at our new headquarters and successfully trained 12 members of the Barrie Police Service. In 2020, the Barrie Police Services also conducted significantly more drug recognition evaluations with 55. This is compared to 33 that were conducted in 2019. As well, our repass or remote piloted aircraft system flights, there was 23 conducted in 2020, and these were as a result of motor vehicle collisions, missing persons investigation, crime scene investigation, tactical or canine calls. Further, the traffic unit investigated 10 fatal motor vehicle collisions in 2020, which was the most we've ever experienced in 1 year, as well as 4 serious personal injury accidents. In regards to community services, the 2020 virtual crime prevention week was very successful. The week opened the doors to the community members to be able to watch our presentations through all social media platforms. There were over 1,000 views of our videos through our YouTube channel. These videos are saved and can be viewed by the public at any time. We shared interactive discussions surrounding body-worn cameras, the Child Advocacy Center, human trafficking, recruiting, tech crimes, impaired driving, and our partnership with the Canadian Mental Health Association. We discussed crimes against seniors, frauds and scams, internet safety, home and business security, and how community members can get involved through neighborhood policing strategies. The Inside Out program, as Deputy Johnson alluded to, was developed by one of our community services special constables and our investigative services co-op for elementary schools. It is an evidence-based prevention program that focuses on positive social, emotional learning methods for all ages. An application has also been submitted to the Civil Revenues Grant in hopes of obtaining initial funding for this program. In October 2020, the Community Services Unit commenced an investigation after several schools were damaged over the summer and fall. 6 arrests were made, 5 charges were laid, and 2 diversions were provided. Police were able to solve a $15,000 mischief that occurred at one of our local high schools in October of 2020. The investigation revealed that one of the subjects involved had not been enrolled in school since June of 2019. In a joint effort with police, the attendance counselor, and the Simcoe County District School Board, was able to successfully re-enroll this person in the 2021 semester. In regards to the court units, one of the biggest developments at the courthouse was the use of video appearances by accused for bail hearings, remands, and trials. This has dramatically decreased the number of prisoners that are required to be lodged and transported through the cell block at the courthouse. Along with this increase in accused persons appearing in court via video, the Barrie Police Service has also implemented practices to allow officers to testify in court hearings from the police station. Although our officers are still required to attend some in-court hearings in person, we anticipate that remote testimony will continue to be an option for our officers to provide testimony and evidence going forward in the future. Finally, with the creation, the case management unit creation was in the approval stage for a number of years. However, the pilot project was initiated last November. The initiative is to ensure complete and proper Crown briefs are submitted for criminal charges, which will assist in successful prosecutions.
Thank you. As you would see from the picture and probably in a lot of the local media, Project Glaze and Project Moon were two of the big street crime incidents or investigations that occurred over 2020. Project Glaze was the biggest drug investigation in the history of the service as it relates to the amount of drugs seized and currency seized. There was substantial amounts of cocaine, Canadian currency, and vehicles that were seized as a result. I wonder where the name came from Project Glaze? Our investigators named the project after observing one of the first drug deals take place using a Timbits box, referencing the glazed Timbits that at one time filled the box. Project Moon, this was an investigation of a Toronto street gang that was attempting to establish itself in Barrie. They were using a downtown bar, the Night King. As a result of the investigation, multiple arrests and multiple charges were laid. Project Moon's name came from the investigators' hope to bring into the light the street gang operating out of the Night King bar. Play on words. Our homicide unit. A couple of incidents to discuss and highlight. A 2-year investigation results in an extradition and charges. So a relationship occurred. The individual involved in the intimate partner relationship went down into the States and then began to criminally harass the victim. Investigators worked for 2 years to locate the charged individual. In 2020, investigators were successful in extraditing the suspect from the United States. As you can appreciate, there was a massive amount of paperwork involved in that. And that individual was charged with the offense committed. A manslaughter conviction for a drug dealer after a fatal overdose. In 2017, a woman died as a result of a drug overdose. The drug dealer who supplied the victim with the drugs that killed her was arrested and charged for her death. In 2020, he was convicted of manslaughter, the first manslaughter conviction by the Barrie Police Service involving a drug dealer. I did have this noted as a highlight, certainly the continued investigation of the Catherine Gennaro homicide. In October 1994, Catherine Gennaro was murdered in her Dunlop Street apartment. Throughout the 2020 year, the homicide unit investigated new information that they had received in relation to Catherine Gennaro's death. As you can appreciate, the arrest took place in 2021, but the massive amount of time and effort that our investigators put into the investigation did eventually provide some measure of closure. With respect to our human trafficking unit, the first guilty plea in human trafficking in the county of Simcoe. In March 2020, the human trafficking unit obtained the first guilty plea of human trafficking in the county. The trafficker received 4 years in custody, and joint efforts were made between the Barrie Police Service, Victim Services, and the Barrie Women's Shelter to obtain funding, facilitating the victim's journey through rehabilitation and getting reestablished. For the rest of the services, the members of the service, we all received training in human trafficking by means of an online portal, appreciating the COVID effect. Human trafficking unit members also attended frontline parades and provided some protocols and frontline investigative techniques and practices for our members. The human trafficking unit has also been integrated into the new recruit training schedule to affect the learning process of our new recruits. Last highlight there, the arrest of trafficker after 7 victims came forward. Initially, there were 4, but as a result of the investigation and it coming forward, the total of 7 victims came forward. A side note there, the individual charged continued to operate the escort agency, which was the beginning of the initial investigation. Our tech crimes unit became involved, and that individual was again arrested and remains in custody and denied bail. Our forensic identification unit. As you can appreciate, members of our identification unit, by the nature of their work, are regularly faced with difficult and sometimes disturbing crime scenes that involve death and violence. They're now participating in Project Safeguard. It's a yearly mental health and wellness update checkups to ensure their well-being and their wellness. We also purchased a DFO ninhydrin chamber. You might have seen something like this on CSI. It's a machine that assists our investigators to develop latent fingerprints from objects. There's a picture there. You place it in, and if there are latent prints, they're brought up faster than our historic practice. Additionally, we improved our print analysis process. In 2020, our identification unit altered our historic practice of going through larger services, and we now directly leverage the RCMP secure online portal called the Central Latent Client, CLC. That allows participant police agencies, of which we are now one, to download latent prints, images, and send them through the criminal investigations and get real-time analysis by AFIS, the Automated Fingerprint Identification System, trained staff out of Ottawa. And this can have a very significant impact on our solve rates within the city. Lastly, the expansion of the tech crimes unit, the lab itself. So moving into the new building was a huge asset for our members. More equipment was purchased to ensure a fully functional lab. Computers and software to enhance capabilities were sought, and we are now in place. Again, moving forward into as we investigate, these skill sets are incredibly important. With that, I'll hand it over to Danny for highlights from the Records Information Management Services.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Records and Information Management Services is now able to return record check results electronically with no additional fees. This new process for record checks has resulted in less traffic at headquarters, saves time on scanning, printing, sealing, and mailing documents, and reduces the cost of postage, paper, and envelopes. In addition to the efficiencies that this new process has created within our service, applicants are receiving their record check results back faster. E-intake. E-intake is a program that enables officers to swear to court information and documents electronically. The pilot began in November 2019 and was ongoing through 2020. RIMS worked closely with the Ministry of Attorney General and Optic to ensure the success of the project and provided input on how to make the system more efficient. E-intake is now being rolled out to other police services across the province. This process is saving officers time having to travel and wait at the courthouse to have documents signed by the Justice of the Peace. It is a completely electronic system and is part of the government's strategy to modernize the justice system. RIMS was able to continue providing our community with record checks through the pandemic because of our expanding online services. Some of our neighboring police services were not processing record checks or were only doing them for essential service workers. This is a great example of how we are committed to our community. We continue to work to further expand our online services to better serve the public and keep everyone safe. Although fewer record checks were completed in 2020 due to the pandemic, 70% were completed online compared to 22.5% completed online in 2019. In total, we processed 7,138 record checks in 2020. Crown briefs are an area where we saw increase. In 2020, we completed 5,794 Crown briefs compared to 5,002 in 2019. So now we're going to pass it over to Inspector Burke to speak in regards to executive services.
Thanks, Danny. From Executive Services, there's 2 special projects that are ongoing that I know the board is very much aware of. One is the body-worn camera pilot project. The second one is the Digital Evidence Management System, or otherwise known as DEMS. These are both under the guidance of Staff Sergeant Dave Goodbrand. We're quite fortunate to have Staff Sergeant Goodbrand on board with this. Barrie Police is considered one of the early adopters in regards to digital evidence management system, and subsequent to that, the Administrative Solicitor General has actually signed on the Axon platform. That has put the Barrie Police Service in a very advantageous position compared to many other police services throughout the province. In fact, Staff Sergeant Goodbrand has consulted with a number of other services in the province, many larger services that have looked to the Barrie platform to implement this program. Moving on to the Planning, Policy and Research unit, the commencement of systemic review started in September of 2020. We've conducted surveys within the service. We've also commenced focus groups, both internally and externally, and we've engaged an external consultant who's actually an academic link with Georgian College to assist us with that. Basically, systemic review, we're looking to identify areas of improvement regarding response processes and engagement within the community, both internally and externally. Addition to that, this past fall, we completed the community safety survey. Very pleased to report over 1,600 responses. That's a 358% increase over our 2019 survey. So it certainly demonstrates that the interest in community safety is definitely a topic that's on the minds of the citizens of Barrie. We also have the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, which Barrie Police is a partner with the city and a number of other agencies. We are on track to have that completed this summer, and we also have a Community Safety and Wellbeing Officer. That's a new position. It resides in Operational Services. Happy to say that Constable Kira Brooks has assumed that position and has certainly hit the ground running with that. Procedure updates. There's a number of new legislations that are on the horizon. One that's already in place is the SIU Act, and we've adapted our procedures and our practices to be in alignment with that. For the professional standards unit, risk management was moved to professional standards, as was mentioned in the org chart. What this does is it also brings over oversight in regards to financial liability. That includes safe arrival, departmental towing, seized vehicles, and civil matters. Evidence and property, certainly an area that we view as a risk management area, is under the supervision of the risk management officer. We've transitioned software, as many other areas in the service have, from Smartsheets to Microsoft, and that's to track civil litigation, departmental motor vehicle collisions, and naloxone administration. Moving on to fleet, facilities, and infrastructure. First thing we want to talk about is our exceptional custodial staff, City of Barrie employees. Acting Deputy Johnson spoke about the COVID response for the service. Integral to that response was the custodial staff who we've worked with at Sperling and now continue to work with at Fairview. We recognize their efforts, and actually their excellence is a better term, by awarding the entire cleaning staff a Chief's coin, which basically recognizes their excellent efforts to maintaining the building in a safe and clean environment. Just so you know, the square footage from Sperling to 110 Fairview has basically tripled. So you can see the work task that was ahead of the custodial staff once they moved to the new building. As for our fleet, we've introduced hybrid SUVs. Those are Ford Explorers. We've also introduced a Toyota Camry hybrid into non-frontline use. These are certainly the preliminary steps that we're taking to try to be more fuel efficient, cost efficient, and energy efficient. We're currently undertaking a fleet audit, and that's looking for efficiencies across the fleet. One of the considerations that we are looking at, based on the request from City Council, is to consider integrating a completely electric vehicle into our fleet, and we are in discussions with the city to commence that. And that is it for executive services. Thank you very much.
Good morning. In 2020, our training unit met the challenge of continuous mandated training during a pandemic while adhering to public health regulations and protocols, still meeting and exceeding standards. This left us well poised for 2021, with all of our members entering the new year fully recertified. In addition, during the calendar year 2020, all training records and templates were captured electronically, which was a significant change over 2019. The training unit was also able to move forward with the trial of new patrol vests, as well as the deployment and training of all frontline officers in the use of the Leatherman Raptor medical shears and multi-tool, which is an important new piece of kit for frontline officers. In terms of our human resources unit, we continued recruiting and hiring during a pandemic, which certainly was a very, very challenging environment. I'm pleased to report that in 2020, we received a total of 272 civilian applications, 213 police constable applications, 85 special constable applications, and several co-op and student applications, totaling 573. We hosted our first ever online promotional exams. 10 constables completed the sergeant promotional exam with a 90% success rate. 4 sergeants completed the staff sergeant promotional exam with a 75% success rate, and 3 staff sergeants completed the inspector promotional exam with a 100% pass rate. Major for the human resources unit was the implementation of the new constable selection system in 2020. 2020 saw the new CSS being rolled out, which was adopted in whole by the Barrie Police Service. This new system is designed to reduce various barriers to becoming a police officer and will also provide the service the opportunity and the ability to hire from a more diverse candidate pool. With the ability to select candidates from the aforementioned diverse candidate pool, we hope to identify the most competitive and best suited individuals to become sworn members of the Barrie Police Service, who will better reflect the makeup of our community and its unique identity.
Thank you, Steve. On the finance unit, the 2021 budget process included significant transparency and public engagement. The community shared their comments, questions, and concerns through questionnaires, deputations, and direct communication. On January 25th, Barrie City Council approved the city's 2021 budget, including the Barrie Police Service Board budget request. In 2020, administration of our benefit programs were transferred from the City of Barrie to the service. Such benefits include health and dental, life insurance, long-term disability, and recently, administration of the OMERS pension plan. To accommodate this transfer of responsibility, a second financial analyst position was added to the finance unit complement. And a shift to move away from paper-based processes to electronic reporting was recognized. One example being an app that was developed in-house to accommodate more accurate and timely reporting. The IT unit, our unsung heroes, the team works extremely hard to equip our headquarters to enable seamless transition for final occupancy. Within days of the move, as the pandemic took full effect, the team successfully ensured that all members working from home were guaranteed connectivity. Virtual solutions were adopted, such as Teams and Zoom, and a multitude of other behind-the-scenes priorities that the end user may never know about were fully accomplished. In 2020, the service rolled out Office 365. This was a significant shift for the service as we moved from our own systems to a more functional and maintainable Microsoft Azure cloud environment. And there was a significant upgrade to our computer-aided dispatch system, one of our most crucial frontline resources. Known as CAD, it includes upgrading all the mobile tournaments in our fleet, as well as the terminals in our communications center. As you can see, despite a worldwide pandemic, our service continued to work throughout the year towards implementing the 3 priorities from our strategic plan: crime prevention, community safety and law enforcement, community engagement and collaboration, and organization excellence and sustainability. We now have some time if anyone has any questions. The chief will receive any. On behalf of the group, thank you.
On behalf of the board, excellent summary. Obviously, those have been around. We see those, remember bits and pieces throughout the year, but to summarize it all for us and is impressive. So thanks very much. Any questions from the board for the chief and or the management team? Lynn, I think maybe you were first, and Mayor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. As my first board meeting, this was a great presentation to have. Really gets me up to speed quickly, so that's fantastic. I did have a question. One of the numbers that stood out to me was the non-emergency calls, and I'm just wondering, what are some of the examples of those types of calls that we're taking in that are considered non-emergency, just to give that some context for me.
Thank you very much for your question. We have multiple ways of categorizing our calls for service. So traditionally, we've used the term criminal and non-criminal, and we have shifted now to emergency and non-emergency calls. So we may start off with an incident such as a break and enter. It is a criminal offense, but as the suspects, for example, may not be on scene, that would be considered a non-criminal call for service, even though we need to be present for it, collect evidence, and submit a report, and it may lead to an arrest at the end of the investigation. So that would be considered non-criminal. Criminal, but non-emergency in nature. And then we have some other calls. Does that address your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. I was just trying to gain some perspective around what types of calls might be coming in. So that makes sense to me. Incidents that have already occurred, things of that nature. Okay.
Mayor Lehman, then Arif.
Thanks. I'm wondering, Chief, if you or the leadership can speak a little bit more to the alternate response unit. The presentation referenced expanding its activities. Maybe they could just say a bit more, or you could say a bit more about what those activities are and the expansion in the unit that happened last year.
Thank you very much. I'll start off, and if Acting Deputy Johnson would like to join in, that would assist also. Our alternative response unit was already established in 2020, but we saw an expansion in that area as we continued to service our community on offenses even during the pandemic. So we identified individuals to work in our alternative response unit that would respond to inquiries from the community where a police officer traditionally may have attended a call for service but was not required. So we focused in on property type crime. So for example, mischief, a theft from an auto would be very common themes. If there was evidence in regards to the mischief, we may detail an officer to attend to collect evidence, but the initial report would be taken over the telephone, and follow-up investigations were conducted by our alternative response unit. So even though officers did not participate in a face-to-face with community members, we have led to significant arrests in regards to the property type crimes. As the board is aware, we are engaging in a review on our other responses within our community. And that review is being led by Inspector Peter Dusnap, and we are looking at our alternatives to how we respond, whether that be with our calls for service in regards to mental health calls. Are we going to expand that program, for example? So what was highlighted in the presentation today was specifically our alternative response unit in regards to calls of property type offenses, but we're looking to expand our calls for service in the way in which we deploy our own resources and our partnership with other services within our community.
And I recognize the work's being done internally to plan for that and examine what calls might be responded to through partnerships in the community with social services or otherwise. Maybe you could just update us as to those plans. You just started speaking to them at the end about, taking a look at calls for service, for example, for mental health, and the ways that we might be able to further engage our partners. So we've had the COAST program for a few years. We had to fund that ourselves when funding was interrupted. Perhaps maybe you could just give us a sense, using that one as an example of an area of potential alternative response.
So in regards to that area, our response to mental health, there has been a lot of attention placed on this issue, not just within our community, but across the nation. Our response here is a joint collaborative approach, whether it's through the COAST program or through our Collaborate Barrie program when those individuals are at elevated risk. We are looking at healthcare providers, responding with police or individually responding from being in our communication center, evaluating it in communications, and then deploying individuals that either could be part of the Barrie Police Service, but not what we would see traditionally as a uniformed response with the use of force options, for example, that they would be nurse practitioners that would be responding, whether they do that in a team of 2 as healthcare providers or an enhanced version of our COAST program. There are initiatives that are across North America and around the world that we are currently evaluating to ensure that we're offering the best service to our community when they're at elevated risk or suffering from multiple mental health crises.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question was exactly the mayor, so thank you for asking that, Mr. Mayor. I am left with one other question, and that is, Chief, there is essentially no industry or no element of certainly Canadian society that hasn't been impacted by COVID and our response to it in terms of embracing the use of technology, working remotely. And much of that actually catalyzed sort of what had maybe been several years old or decades old resistance to evolve practices. And we've really been forced, and we saw an opportunity to embrace those changes, certainly the police service. My question is, along with that, we cannot deny certainly a spike in migration out of the GTA to places like Barrie, as well as existing residents no longer commuting down to the GTA for work, therefore more people staying locally, working here locally. I'm curious, how does that change or impact your radar in terms of your ability to serve if more people are going to be living here in Barrie and working here in Barrie than was initially anticipated in terms of that scale or that change in migration or growth of the city? How has that changed your need to plan for the future in a maybe a truncated timeline? And secondly, is cybercrime also going to change? Or are we anticipating an increase in cybercrime as more people are going to, at least for the near term, going to be working either remotely or with computers?
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. In regards to your first question in regards to, are we prepared for the growth in the city and the change in the complement of our city? And I would say through our strategic business plan, we regularly review our response in the community. We work closely with the city of Barrie in regards to the growth patterns to ensure that we are meeting the needs in the 2 community areas in the South End that have been identified to ensure that we have the resources when we are able to respond to that. The increase in the population growth anticipated with the build of several towers in our community. We are ready for that through the planning of our service. When we speak to being prepared, on that also looks at potentially the increase in our human resources. Right now, we are sitting in a very good position. We have enough civilian members and sworn members to respond to the needs of our community. During 2020, we did see some changes in regards to our calls for service, and we were adaptable and flexible and were able to respond to those needs. So we saw an initial dip at the beginning of the first wave during COVID, and then it has transitioned from that, and we are consistent with our calls for service in the last 4 years, and we have members that are able to respond to that. The calls for service have shifted somewhat in 2020, but we have responded to all of those calls. In regards to cyber crime, we do have a tech crime unit now that are supporting our investigators when they are involved in cyber crime. We have seen a shift across the country in regards to that. There are no boundaries in regards to cyber crime, so it's not specifically focused within our geographic boundaries. It can be international, and victims and suspects are from around the world. We are supporting the work jointly through work with the OPP to respond to cybercrime also. So that's a new secondment of one of our members is participating in that area.
Are there any other questions? And Robert, I think that's you on the call. Any questions that you may have?
Thanks, Chair. Actually, I had one question, but it was asked by the mayor, so thank you.
Any last questions? Well, Chief, you and your team again, thank very much on behalf of the board for an excellent summary of 2020, and I'll be interested to see whether, you know, it looks like some of the practices that we've developed may have come out of COVID in terms of electronic this and electronic that. So there may be some positives to our organization. So I'm sure that you will continue to look at those opportunities. So thanks again, Chief and team. There were 2 items in the consent agenda, staff acknowledgements and public complaints. Would anyone like either of those pulled or have any questions? Mayor Lehman?
Sorry, just a quick question on the public complaints, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Okay. I noticed in the detailing of the complaints, there's a rise in what I would call landlord-tenant situations, which have produced complaints against our officers. And I imagine these situations are just as difficult as many others faced by the officers. But is this something, would you attribute this to COVID in the sense that we are being called in now to evict tenants, and we have tenants who are unsure of their rights and landlords who are unsure of their rights and whether the eviction is legal or not and those sorts of things? I mean, this has been a little bit confusing during COVID for everyone. And the related question is it falling back on police officers to try and interpret the changing landlord-tenant laws, because this has changed. You know, there was a pause on residential evictions during the first wave and so forth. So is this maybe a byproduct in a way of the changing COVID rules around landlord-tenant stuff?
Thank you very much for your question, Mayor Lehman. We have reviewed the situation similar to as you describe it in regards to we were provided specific directions from the province of Ontario in regards to how we responded to landlord and tenants. I just think from a community perspective, there are heightened concerns in many of our responses to the community just because. And I don't want to overuse the term COVID fatigue, but we are seeing that in our community. But what is good is that individuals are calling the police and we're able to respond to assist them. We continue to educate our members on all the changes around legislation and other adequacy standards that are placed on us. But I would say I would associate the increase in our calls for service around landowner tenant due to the COVID, and then the members of the community that may not be satisfied with the results. And in our update in regards to concerns, they have been investigated. Some have been closed in regards to landlord and tenant, but Inspector Burke has been working with our professional standards investigators to action those ones as required.
Okay, thank you for that. So it does sound like one of the byproducts of COVID, maybe less directly because of confusion over what the law is and more because of increased conflict between members of households and between tenants and landlords. Are we being asked to be the sheriff here more often than we should? Is there a resourcing issue where we are, you know, we're the default, as we always are, because we're available 24/7. Is there, you know, is that an issue in terms of resourcing at this time of the sheriff's office or the capacity of the landlord and tenant system?
We haven't specifically evaluated that from a sheriff's department perspective, but we know that we have been called upon to respond to issues in our community that we normally wouldn't have been asked to respond to. I can't say specifically it was the landlord and tenant area, but we haven't had an increase there in call.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Arf, please.
Thank you, Chief. Just on your response there, a question that I have then is, what is our understanding as a service when the tribunal, which I suppose is an extension of the justice system, issues an order for eviction? Is a sheriff or the default, if it's a police officer attending, is simply there to oversee the peaceful execution of the order and not be there to negotiate or interpret? I'm just curious, because if that's the question in the complaint, that the complainant was unclear of the merits or the content of the order, is it the police's position that we're there to just oversee a peaceful execution of the order versus interpret?
There are occasions where we solely attend to participate in those, but when we're doing the evictions, on occasion, we're also there with the sheriff's department. So there is always the opportunity to educate members of the public on things such as this, but we have seen a delay in the court systems, not just hearings. So we are cognizant of that piece too. And we are there to keep the peace, and on a couple of our complaints that have come through the system may not be reflected on this public complaints, but a lot of time it is education, and that has resolved the situation. But we have seen incidences where there are assaultive behavior by those involved in the landlord and tenant dispute, and people have been arrested and are being held accountable for their actions.
Thanks, Chief. Seeing no more hands, a motion to receive the two consent items, please. Arf,
So moved, Chair.
Thank you. Next up, Chief, I think there was already reference made in the 2020 review to the body-worn cameras and the work of Staff Sergeant Goodbrand. Can you introduce the body-worn camera project to us, please?
We have on our virtual meeting today, we have Staff Sergeant Dave Goodbrand, who has implemented multiple technical digital management advancements and our body-worn cameras, and Inspector Burke. So I'm going to pass it over to them to provide a brief overview to the board, updating us on the body-worn cameras.
Thanks very much, Chair and Chief, for that. You'll be glad to know that I pulled Dave Goodbrand off of a conference call that he was discussing digital evidence management, so he can come here and brief us on the body-worn camera update. So without further ado, he will give you the accurate detail, whereas I may have guessed at a few things. So Dave, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everybody, and I apologize. I was tied up on another meeting. It's definitely a hot topic across the province, if not across the country. Digital evidence management, as we know from past meetings. I'm proud to say that our service and our community is leading the charge in many aspects across that, with many agencies turning to us for advice. So we're definitely trying to do it right and make sure that we cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure everything's done well. In regards to the body-worn camera update, I believe you've all been provided a copy of the report that was prepared. Without going step by step and reading back to what you already have read, we've definitely covered off a lot of the aspects of our program with the pilot, with including making the draft procedure, which will slowly be amended into the implemented full procedure when we, and if we get approval to move forward with body-worn cameras to our frontline officers. So currently what's happened with the body-worn camera pilot is we've done approximately 4 months in the front line with 25 officers spread across 4 platoons, the traffic unit, and some people that work downtown in our crew unit, as well as our 1 K9 officer, just to get an idea how it works in dog tracks. Those, over the last couple of weeks, we've removed those cameras from the front line, partly so we can get the quotes prepared, the business case put together to present to all of you folks. But also it's a big part of evaluating the body-worn cameras, in the sense that we've given these officers a tool that they've, and just so you know, the feedback coming from all of them to me is that they wouldn't want to go without them now that they've had them. But to give them that soak period, to not have the cameras, to see if they feel different in the community, to feel if they notice a change in how they're treated without the camera, et cetera. Because we're not only just managing, you know, making transparency, as we've discussed in the past, but we're also ensuring that we, you know, that we look at the civility of how people treat us when we do have a body-worn camera on. And the flip side is how we act when we have a body-worn camera on as well. So we pulled those off. Now what I'm in the midst of doing is I've sent a post-pilot survey that was prepared by Dr. Sitzma of Queen's University. She's helped us develop our surveys so they're developed properly. And it's been sent to all of our 25 officers. What I hope is that within the next week or so, I'll have all of them have completed that survey as they come in and cycle through their shift rotations. As well, I've also created a pilot officer feedback form for me to help evaluate what did and what didn't work for them, to look at how did the signal device work, did they take advantage and did they appreciate the 2 cruisers that we had set up, so when you turned your lights on, it automatically triggered the body-worn camera. All the different processes that we have tested in the pilot, so we can get their feedback. And you know, what we do know is that from preliminary discussions with these officers is that they all felt that it was a very valuable tool. They felt that they were treated differently and better. They felt that it did calm people and create some civility. But the trade-off is there is administrative work that comes along with it. There is redacting. So, you know, other police agencies call and ask already for advice, and they think that they're just going to throw a body-worn camera on and get out into the public. But there is a whole piece to sorting out, you know, for an example, a vehicle stop. If there's a child in the vehicle and we're going to disclose that for a trial, we have to make sure that that child is blurred. So we are developing those processes and working with our new case management team and really getting them up to speed and training them on all of those redaction pieces that come along with it. So there's a lot of work that's still ahead. We've completed a lot of work, and I'm very satisfied with the way and the direction that this has gone. And I believe that our pilot officers have truly appreciated being part of this pilot. And as I've said, most have said they don't want to lose the cameras. As a matter of fact, I got an email yesterday from one of the officers that completed the survey, and the first question was, well, actually it was the survey is complete. First question is, when do we get them back? So we already know that they don't want them gone. So I'll continue moving forward, get the evaluation piece completed, get the surveys back, and that'll help me build the business case with that information. So that's kind of where we're at. And then we're working with Axon to get a full quote. We know the general cost, but there's options that we're looking at on, you know, of course, we tested the Cadillac. We took the Cadillac for a test drive. So now we got to see if we can talk him out and letting us buy the Cadillac. So, so that's kind of where we're at. But I mean, there are a lot of features that we tested that I believe are critical, and that will be covered off in the report. But I'm open to questions if anybody has anything from the report.
Are there any questions?
I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign.
No. Mayor Lehman?
Yeah, thank you. Sergeant, thank you very much for the report. Have you had any opportunity to analyze the data, the interactions yet, in terms of the utility of the data for, I recognize it was only in the last few months, but is it working well as a tool for evidence? Is it working well in terms of assisting with investigations by providing more information to the investigating officers? It's, I guess that one of the concerns around cameras is that they're sort of oversold as an evidentiary tool. So I'm kind of curious as to whether we feel that there's been a benefit just based on the trial.
Well, the downside, thank you, Mayor, but the downside of a small or shorter pilot is that we don't get to truly appreciate the evidence that's been collected and how it's going to result in court. But what we do know is, yes, there's critical evidence that's captured. So for instance, when an officer arrests somebody for impaired, traditionally without a body-worn camera, the evidence that they are viewing and putting in the notebook is based on it. When they go to court, they have to articulate that. There's no true account of what they viewed at the time because there was no recording. That maybe perhaps the video of the person coming into the cell block. Now with a body-worn camera, we have that evidence before the camera. You see the person, you see their slurring, you see their staggering. And when we do review the digital evidence, we do see that you're capturing evidence that will be critical, not only maybe if it goes to a trial, but potentially that will lead to a guilty plea before wasting time to go to trial. Unfortunately, because we only did a 4-month pilot, we haven't been able to truly say, yes, that's what's occurred here. But we do know that when you look at research around the world, that guilty pleas do increase because there is actual evidence of the offense occurring. Now, when you go to a call and you don't capture the offense that's occurred in front of the camera in front of you, and we're responding after the fact, it definitely gets us a true account of that interaction with the person, that the statement is the true best evidence opposed to writing it on a piece of paper. You're getting it right from the person right onto the camera, and we can also use the devices in the field as well. So yeah, the short answer to your thing is we unfortunately haven't been able to truly test it in our environment because we haven't had it long enough for something to go to trial. But I am confident that it will definitely, based on what I have reviewed, that it's going to assist us in many ways when it moves into trial, particularly with even POA court and traffic matters or Provincial Offences Act court.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Appreciate it.
Marv?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Staff Sergeant.
You're on mute.
Very dynamic. I beg your pardon? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good now.
Hashtag 2021. Okay, thanks very much, Staff Sergeant. I appreciate your report. Certainly dynamic. Took me a little while when you asked if we had questions for me to actually finish processing your actual presentation. There's a lot of good information there. My understanding, and I think I'm hopeful, and I think I share that with everyone, is that a goal of an interaction with a member of the public is often to de-escalate or to mitigate escalation. And I also would understand that if we were to look at your statistics in terms of numbers of interactions with the members of the public, there's a pretty healthy percentage that are repeat interactions with the same individual, maybe on a different incident, but we have familiar interactions with members of the public. And my question is, is it too early, or do you have any findings in terms of, I mean, I'm assuming your officers aren't wearing something that says "smile, you're on camera," but I'm assuming it's also obvious enough that the member of the public is on camera. Are you noticing a change in that regard in terms of how we obviously reduce escalation? I don't want to say necessarily de-escalate, but reduce opportunity for escalation. Our goal is compliance. Our goal is to not see that person in court. Our goal is to not see that person in jail. Our goal is healthy community. our goal is to get the person the assistance they need. Are we seeing any direct correlation there?
Yeah, absolutely. Right from the start, the feedback from the officers, I try to interact with them on a regular basis to get their input, is yes, we do see that. From the start of our first presentation, moving towards body, we wanted to really explore that civility piece. And it's funny, a lot of the studies that have been done around the world have said it's been hard to determine if there's an impact of use of force with a body-worn camera, events of body or use of force. That's a tough one. It's like community-based, there's community policing. If I'm driving through a subdivision, it's hard to measure it when nothing's occurred. It may be effective, but you wouldn't know. So when you look at the body-worn camera, you can't say it didn't affect the use of force interaction because the person may have intended to cause a problem, but sees our camera running and then decides this isn't the time. But what we do know is the officer's feedback is yes. Generally speaking, people are interested in the camera. When they come up to an officer, it has a red light that kind of circles, so it's very apparent. We do ask our officers to also notify the public that they're being recorded, even in a public setting, just to let you know, we're recording this interaction on my body-worn camera. Most people don't care. I think the irony is most officers, they thought they might get some pushback. I think the majority of people said, okay, well, thank you very much for letting me know. But we do notice that people act differently. And I expected that. I figured that when people know they're on camera, generally, their demeanor changes, and that creates a better interaction for us because we don't get a heightened, when somebody comes running out of house swearing at us, you get heightened, but when they know there's a camera, they might calm down, which calms us down and creates a better environment for both people involved. So, I mean, this just isn't us. This has been looked at across the board from many research studies done in the US and in Great Britain as well. And there is a good effect on people to have that interaction and know that they're being recorded. So I believe it is, and it's really early to know how it's going to affect it. And I hope the feedback we get from the officers will really pinpoint that and ensure that we can identify that in our business case.
Thanks, Staff Sergeant. Appreciate your response.
I hope I answered your question there.
You did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant. There may be some other questions I would ask the board. I have one, but I'll do it through the chief to you, just a matter of timing. I think we need to move on with the agenda. So great summary as to where we're at. I think, we're excited about that. And what really pleased me was your comment that you opened up with, was that the officers are appreciating and are anxious to actually get back the cameras on them. So that to me is great. So I look forward to a continued update. Chief, the next on the agenda is your update, please.
Thank you, folks.
I think you may be on mute, Chief.
Well, Staff Sergeant Goodbrand and Inspector Burke may have left the meeting, but I was just thanking them for their efforts on this valued pilot project, and we hope that we can implement it within a short matter of time. Your update today, I will keep brief, recognizing our time that we have. So if we first go to our COVID update, as you have all experienced, we have ended our stay-at-home order and our provincial lockdown this Tuesday, and we've entered the red zone for the provincial framework. We recognize that there is a variant of concern in our community, and we continue to encourage members to comply with the public health recommendations. We continue to see complaints or respond to complaints in regards to gathering sizes or individuals not wearing masks when they're required to do so. We are responding to all of those complaints, and there have been charges laid, and we're also using this as an opportunity for awareness to our community. Due to the standardized COVID wellness and health initiatives that we've put in place with the Barrie Police Service, and it was alluded to during our 2020 year in review, we have been fortunate that no member of the Barrie Police Service has tested positive for COVID. We have individuals that have been symptomatic or have been exposed or potentially exposed to COVID, and they have complied with our directions and tests have been completed, but as I indicated, it is negative. In regards to the vaccination and the inoculation clinics that will be occurring or are occurring within our community, we are working, as indicated in the past, with the OPP on the vaccine deliveries through RVH. And there has been some delays, and that was from a manufacturer perspective or items not arriving in the United States due to weather conditions, but we continue on task with the shipment, so we're very fortunate in regards to that. And from a first responders perspective, we are working with public health to ensure that our members receive the vaccination when we enter into the phase that we have that opportunity. Further to the COVID update, we did have an enforcement blitz from the 5th to the 8th of this month. It was supported by the Ministry of Health, along with the Ministry of Labor, City of Barrie, and Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit. I will focus in on the 2 days that the Barrie Police Service was involved, which was Sunday the 7th and Monday the 8th. During those 2 days, we conducted 80 inspections with bylaw. And we focused in on convenience store, curbside retail pickups, and gas stations. We issued 29 warnings under the Reopening of Ontario Act, and we laid 5 charges. And that was focused around no safety plan in place, no employee screening, and individuals were not wearing their required masks in indoor settings. The next slide speaks to our calls for service. So we see that our calls for service remain consistent with our last 4-year average, even though we have been in provincial shutdowns or responding to the COVID situation and how that has impacted our community. So from a computer-aided dispatch, we have seen over 5,000 calls for service in the month of January, and our calls for service into our service and within our service, we have just over 9,000 calls. I won't specifically break them down, it's illustrated here, but we continue to monitor our mental health calls and our response to these calls. If you look at our charges, whether they're criminal or federal charges, we can see that we are responding to administrative of justice offenses with our fail to comply with probation or our fail to comply with conditions of release. Our property crimes, whether that includes thefts, possessions or mischief type offenses, and our crimes against persons offenses such as assaults and threats are all there. And we are responding still to guns and drug activity in our communities. The next slide is really a highlight of some of the calls that we are responding to. As this is available on the screen and will be available on our website, I will just focus in on a couple of the calls. I did speak to firearms and drugs earlier, and if you look at February the 3rd, one of our officers conducted a traffic stop believing that the occupants were involved in a drug transaction. I can say that a loaded handgun, cash, and a quantity of cocaine and oxycodone were seized. The 2 males were arrested with possession of a controlled substance, possession for the purposes of trafficking, and one of the males involved was also charged with possession of a loaded, restricted firearms. And as you may have noticed yesterday, for the last couple of days, there was an announcement from the federal government in regards to some firearm legislative changes. We are educating our members on those changes. We also see or would like to promote to yourselves and the community that we are still involved in the ride spot check programs and HTA enforcement. We were able to arrest an individual that attempted to avoid the ride spot check and refused to stop. We utilized our own police vehicles to ensure that that person safely was detained. He was charged with flight from police and impaired operation of a motor vehicle. When he was brought into custody, he had hidden on his body drugs, and he was required to attend our local hospital to have those drugs removed, and he was charged for that and his impaired operation. One of the things that we're still seeing, not just in our community, but around the world, we're still seeing child pornography and the victimization of young children involved in that. We continue to work with our partners across the province and across the country in this area. In January, we worked with Niagara Regional Police Service, and we arrested a male in our community for making and distributing child pornography. Also, we work with our partners, not just our policing partners, but other law enforcement agencies, Correctional Services Canada, where we were able to locate a male that was had a parole warrant. It was an interesting arrest as he tried to escape over several rooftops. He was detained and he was delivered to Correctional Services on the strength of that warrant. And then we had the HDA enforcement in regards to many drivers in our community are still driving without license and no insurance, and we arrested an individual with a stolen vehicle also. The next item that I just hope to provide a brief update to the board is in regards to the February 4th arrest of a male on Dunlop Street and the subsequent investigation. The service has provided 2 media releases, but I'll provide a quick review of that matter. At approximately 3 o'clock on February the 4th, a Barrie Police Service officer made an arrest of a 20-year-old male on Dunlop Street East. Videos were taken by witnesses at the scene, and they were posted on multiple social media sites, which generated what I would call a considerable amount of comments, emails, phone calls regarding the officer's contact. Acknowledging the images captured in the videos and knowing the overall need for investigation into police conduct to be thorough and impartial, I asked the Ontario Provincial Police for their assistance. And the following day, on February the 5th, the OPP Professional Standards Unit confirmed that they would conduct a full investigation into the events leading up to the arrest and the conduct of the officer. I will say that maintaining public trust and confidence in a police service is extremely vital to any community. And I assure you that the community of Barrie, that any findings of misconduct by Barrie police officers will be treated seriously and pursued accordingly. In respect to the February 4th incident, the officer has been reassigned to administrative roles pending the outcome of the OPP investigation.
Thank you, Chief Greenwood. Before I open it up for questions on behalf of the board, we recognize how challenging this matter is for the Barrie Police Service, and thank you for your immediate actions you took and will continue to take. As you stated, as you stated, there have been a number of emails, phone calls, and countless social media posts from local community members as well as individuals from afar. We are aware of the comments and concerns expressed by the public. We will continue to ensure that the community will, the process will remain transparent and we will be accountable. We are confident, Chief, that you have taken the correct course of action by initiating an external investigation, and the board thanks the Ontario Provincial Police for their response and involvement in this matter. The board must respect the process and our obligations under the Police Services Act. Taking any action at this time may result in a breach of our legislative requirements or jeopardize the integrity of investigation or court cases. Again, we thank you, Chief. Any other questions for the Chief?
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that. There's one more slide that I'd like to share just as a brief overview of some additional work that we're doing within the service. We were successfully able to secure $175,000 of provincial funding to develop a framework for children and youth sexual violence investigations and HT, which is similar to the work that we participated in with the National Framework for Collaborative Police Response on Sexual Violence and the National Framework for Collective Police Action on Intimate Partner Violence. So we will be collaborating with subject matter experts, whether it be within the policing community, academia, or with the children's aid societies within this area locally or across the province. And most importantly, we are working with the Hospital for Sick Children to develop this. So within the next several months and year, you will hear an update from us on this initiative. Thank you very much.
Any questions of the Chief? Mayor Lehman?
Thank you, Chief, for the update. And just with regards to the February 4th incident, have the OPP given any timeline as to how long they expect the investigation to take?
The OPP are working fully on this investigations. Investigators have been specifically assigned to this. And without going into the legalese that we face ourselves with, but the Police Services Act ensures that a chief's complaint, and that's what has been initiated in this incident, we as police services have 6 months to complete the investigation. The OPP recognizes the complexity of this and the expectations from the public in regards to this investigation. So they're very much aware of their guidelines in regards to it has to be completed within 6 months. But we are liaising with our public, with our professional standards unit and the OPP professional standards unit. So I'm hoping that it will be a thorough, transparent, and timely investigation.
Okay, thank you for that. And the other comment I wanted to make, Mr. Chair, was I really appreciated that last slide, the work that the service has done on intimate partner violence and the leadership role across the country in bringing new approaches to that most critical issue, especially right now. I mean, I know that work was begun long before COVID, and those frameworks developed in some cases, I think a few years ago, as the focus rightly grew on the outcomes of sexual violence and domestic partner violence crimes. But with COVID, it wasn't anticipating COVID, but with COVID, we are all, I think, very concerned about the increase in intimate partner violence, and the fact that those new approaches are now being used across the country, and the role that this service has taken in leading that is not just timely, but it's going to be helping a lot of people in a lot of very difficult situations. So I did want to make that comment as well.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lehman, and not that this was part of this presentation, but just wanted to advise the board within the next half an hour, I will be participating in a report to the Justice Committee at the national level in the House of Commons on coercive control, which would be an extension to the work that we have done on intimate partner violence. So it's very exciting that we have been provided the opportunity to speak on a potential new criminal offense in the Criminal Code of Canada of coercive control.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Mayor. Any other questions or community concerns to identify with the Chief before we conclude? Robert, is that light flashing? Is that?
Thank you, Chair. I have nothing. Thank you.
Just one piece of correspondence was in your package. The Township of Carling did put forth a request for proposal for the Barrie Police Services to provide police services to their township. And in consultation with the chief and the management team, we just replied to him that we would not be providing an RFP. We didn't think it was something we'd be providing police services north of Barrie Sound. So I'm just advising that that correspondence was received. Our next meeting is March the 18th. A motion to adjourn the meeting today. Arif, Mayor Lehman, thanks to everyone. Have a great day. Thank you for your patience and
Thank you.
understanding. So appreciate it, everyone. Be well.
Sorry, just wanted to check. Is the intention to post the recording of this meeting today?
Yes, it will be posted.
Right away? Okay, great. Good to hear.
And that
Okay, thank you.
And that was communicated with the community through our social media
Yeah.
platforms too. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay.